It's a romantic comedy. Very happy to bring on out here writer-director RYan Gosling. You doing?
Thank you very much.
How many of you were at the screening last night, just curiously? A few people. Cool.
No one. All right. Great.
You know, this seeing this like alternate, very not safe for work trailer. It's darker. I like that. It doesn't really give too much away, and you know, I like for those who haven't yet seen the movie, if you can talk about what this dark fairy tale is all about.
Well, it's sort of. So I had an opportunity to work in Detroit, and I'm from Canada, so let's just get that out of the way right now. And I guess growing up in Canada, you know, Detroit was far enough away that I never got there, but it was close enough that I had like a, I guess like a crush on it or something. It just seemed like everything cool came from Detroit, you know, like Eminem and the Model T and, you know, Motor City, just the whole like iconic idea of the American dream. And when I got there, which was a few years ago, it's very different now. They were declaring bankruptcy. It's like 40 miles of abandoned buildings, a lot of, you know, houses burning, being torn down, turning off the power to the street lights. And within these empty neighborhoods, occasionally there's a family trying to hold on to their home. And it seemed that, you know, like the dream had turned into a nightmare for these people. So I thought I'd like to try and make a film about that. And then I thought this sort of fairy tale approach might be the best way to just make it more accessible to everyone, because it feels like, you know, there's lost rivers everywhere, not just in Detroit, and that's sort of what's happening to them is something that is specific to there, but also something that I wanted sort of everybody to be able to relate to. So we sort of gave it this fairy tale tone, and that's how the movie sort of began. You
talked last night that you basically just started roaming with the red camera and basically started making a movie before you even knew you were going to be making a movie. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the creative itches that directing scratched for you that you don't ordinarily get working in film as an actor.
Well, yeah, that's sort of how it started. That like. Well, it started with there were these Brewster projects, which are the projects where they call them the Motown projects, where the Supremes grew up, and they just have a great music history, and they're about to be torn down. And I thought, I thought I wanted to film them, so I got a red camera. I started shooting them, and then there's more like I heard about the Palace Theater, which is where the Stooges first played, and that was going to be torn down, and I started filming, and then after a year, I realized, I guess I'm shooting footage for a movie, and you know, I guess I'm making a movie. This is lonely. I should get some people here. And so I sort of wrote the script, and then I got the actors, and then eventually we were shooting, you know, not on the red anymore, on film, and it was like an actual film. But I guess some of the itches that it scratched were. I guess it was like an opportunity to try some things out, you know, that you don't always get to try on every film. Like, for instance, you know, there's something very like surreal about what's happening there, but at the same time, it's also very real. And I wanted to try and make a film that like incorporated both of those elements. So part of what we tried to do was give it a heightened reality and a fairy tale tone, but also incorporate people from the neighborhoods to give it that sort of to bring the reality into the fantasy. And that was sort of the most fun. It was like sort of working with the non-actors and the actors and trying to balance those tones.
How much, I mean, some of my favorite sequences are the ones that have locals just kind of roaming in there, and you really feel it. It has a different kind of energy
right.
when there's non-professionals mixing with actors. How much of it was made in the moment? How much did you rely on just the exploration of happy accidents and just kind of playing in this environment?
I feel like it was kind of like a healthy balance of both, you know. We always tried to be open to what was going on, you know. For instance, if there was something like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is a scene with Matt Smith and this lady at a gas station, and what it was sort of like, you know, this gas station was the only gas station for like 10 blocks where we were shooting, and I think they were selling something else at the gas station, you know, that like people really wanted, you know, and they didn't care that we were making a movie. They just, you know, like had to get it. And so there was a real tension, you know, because we were trying to shoot this film and people were really sort of upset that we were there. And at a certain point we thought, oh, just like let them in the scene, you know? And so what happened was they started sort of interacting with the actors, and the actors were so, Matt, I think, did this amazing job of pulling this one woman whose name is Mama A into the scene, and they started dancing together, and it had this really, you know, it was literally like the fantasy and the reality were sort of dancing with one another, you know, so it felt like the kind of highlight of what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody participate in the Twitter conversation with Ryan earlier today? Or we're looking at Twitter. This is from Sandra Swan Queen. At Sandra Swan Queen asked, "What scene was the most difficult?"
Okay, well, it was scenes, and they were the most difficult, but they also ended up being sort of, again, some of my favorite scenes, which was that the kid that we hired in our movie, this kid Landon, who plays the little boy in the film, turns out he doesn't like the camera, and he would get very upset and run away from it when he saw it, which makes it, you know, difficult when you're trying to film a scene. But I loved him. He's such a special kid, and we thought, like, how do we? So I remember seeing on the making of the Animal Planet how when they, like, guys would wait for months just to get a shot of the bird coming out of the nest. And I thought, that's a long time to wait for a bird to come out of a nest, you know? But when you see that shot, you're like, God damn, that's a beautiful shot of that bird coming out of the nest. So we adopted those tactics in a way. We sort of like put on long lenses and hid in the bushes. And at one point we hid under some laundry in his room. And, you know, so we didn't make him nervous. You know, he was able to be natural. And we ended up getting some of the most, you know, some of my favorite stuff in the film. It was kind of like what I heard it was like to work with Marlon Brando on Apocalypse Now, you know? That he would just come in and do what he was going to do and then leave. So we called Landon Marlon. But, so that was difficult, but in the end it was like we took it as an opportunity, and in the end it was like, I feel like I'm so glad that we did it. He's amazing in the film.
It's good to know, too, that you can use Animal Planet for, like, parenting tips down the road, too, if need be. Well, speaking of scenes, I think we're going to watch a clip from Lost River. Very good. Oh, man, Ben Mendelsohn is such a deviant in this film. He's so much fun to watch. I mean, they're all really fun to watch. You know, we talked last night about how exciting it is when an actor becomes a filmmaker, because you know that they're going to already know what that experience is like on the other side of the camera. But I was wondering if we could talk maybe more practically about things that you've gleaned from other movie sets and how you were able to approach your actors to be able to get what you needed.
Well, I think, you know, one thing that I got from other movie sets was like this experience of working with some of these actors. Like, for instance, I got to work with Mendelsohn on a film called A Place Beyond the Pines. And, you know, he would come to set with a boombox playing Run DMC and singing it like he was Al Jolson. And it was like, you know, and then he'd put it down and do the scene, but there was this whole other side of him, this kind of like song and dance man, you know? And so I thought, I kind of dog-eared it when we were working together, and I thought, like, if I ever make a film, I'd love to, you know, like write something for him where he could be a terrifying song and dance man, you know? Or, for instance, I almost worked with Saoirse Ronan on a film, or, you know, I got a chance to like rehearse with her, or I worked with Christina Hendricks. So, you know, or like a lot of my crew came from other film sets, like, you know, my first AD, my production designer, my costume designer. We all did a film called Half Nelson together, and we've since made like 5 or 6 movies, you know? So they were all people, you know, I kind of felt like George Clooney in Ocean's 11, where I got to pick, you know, like my special team, and everyone was like a specialist in their field. But they also were all friends. I trusted them. It was a very small movie set, very like familial, like family homemade thing. So, and in my experience, that's kind of where you get the best results in the final product anyways, if you sort of make things that way.
Well, within that dream team, I was wondering if you could talk some about the aesthetics of it. I mean, this is a very visually arresting film. It's very dark. Obviously, there's some really macabre imagery in it as well. From script to screen, how did you approach all of that?
Well, I guess I kind of wanted to, like when I first sent the script to my composer, he a few hours later he texted me and he said, "Dark Goonies, cool." And I was like, okay, good, he gets it, And I think that like Goonies and those early Amblin movies, just like the whole '80s sensibility of films that I grew up on, like you won't see Howard the Duck as a direct reference in the movie, but I mean, there was something very experimental.
Do you like Howard the Duck?
It's haunting.
Awesome.
Or Batteries Not Included, or Gremlins, or whatever. There was something happening then when I first started watching movies. There's something very kind of like experimental in all of that, and so I wanted the film to have that sensibility. And Secret of NIMH was a big influence, and so my storyboard artist was actually one of the animators on Secret of NIMH. And I also was a big fan of Benoit Debie. He's one of my favorite cinematographers. We shot on film. We shot all natural light. We shot with really fast lenses. So, like for instance, if a scene was lit by a TV, it was just really lit by the television, and because we wanted the film to be dark, and we wanted to find a way to sort of capture what was naturally beautiful about the environment, but also, not try and affect it too much.
I think we have another question here from the Twitter conversation earlier. This is from @RYan Gosling Love, LUV. I had to use LUV because LOVE was already taken. This isn't me. Hello, Ryan.
That's my Twitter account, actually, so just sorry
Hello,
about that.
Ryan. My question is simple. Why the name belladonna? It's the name of a toxic plant. Thanks.
Well, simple. It's because it's the name of a toxic plant. And Barbara Steele, who plays belladonna in the film, the great Barbara Steele, she named herself, so I wasn't going to argue with her.
That's incredible. When you're going into battle, as Samuel Fuller would say about filmmaking, there's just no way to know what's going to happen, what obstacles, speed bumps are going to come up. Was there anything that ever felt disastrous or near disastrous that you were able to overcome?
Trying to think. I mean, we had a really charmed experience in Detroit. Obviously the neighborhoods we were in were not, conducive for shooting, and a lot of things could have gone sideways, but they didn't. But I think more than anything, I mean, and this is one aspect of Detroit that we're showing, But the amazing thing about Detroit is that it's also going through this rebirth and this reinvention, and there's an incredible energy there, and there's like great talent and so many, like amazing other locations. And I feel like, I don't know, at the same time as we were sort of like taking risks by shooting in the places we were also really supported by the film community out there. So it felt like, things could have gone sideways, but they didn't, because we had a great team around us.
It's very common for people to want to compare something to something else. This film looks like it's got this style or whatnot. But I was wondering if you could talk about some of your creative influences outside of film, if any.
Well, I mean, again, I feel like the people that really influence your movie at the end of the day are the people you're working with. So like music was a big influence on this film. When I was going around Detroit and shooting on my own over the course of that year, I was listening to a lot of Johnny Jewel's music. And so, that affected how I was shooting and just the tone of what I was doing, and it became sort of cooked into the image from the beginning, I think, working, like Benoit's work is really inspiring to me, so to get to make this movie with him was like a big thrill, but so I don't know, those were influences,
When working with an ensemble, obviously you already told the story about working with a child actor who didn't like the camera, but did you have to use any different styles to be able to talk to different actors, even if you had worked with them previously?
Like different styles of directing?
Sure.
Not really, because the truth is that I hired everyone because I admire them and I trust them, and so for me it wasn't like directing them as much as it was letting them, fill in the characters and sort of tell me what they would and wouldn't do. I mean, I was there if they wanted to talk about something, but I feel like my job was to sort of create an environment and a space for them to sort of do their thing, It's like, for instance, and I feel like that worked for us, like Mendelsohn. There's an amazing scene at the end where he has this crazy, terrifying dance attack. And I didn't know what he was going to do, but I just sort of knew that with the space he would do something. And so he said, look, just set up the camera and I'm going to do my thing. And he came in and he put down his iPad and he put Kendrick Lamar's Bad Bitches. And he started to do this terrifying dance routine that was like nothing I could have written, And so in that case, it's like you're glad you're not like trying to over-direct.
Last night I had asked you like what you had learned from this going forward, because you said you would like to make more films. But more important, what did you learn not to do? Did you have any rookie mistakes that you won't do again?
I mean, there's tons of them, I don't want to highlight them. They're obvious, You don't know how to make a film until you make a film.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part of your first film, is that you're learning as you go. But you immediately, once you finish, just can't wait to get back in there and start sort of applying all the things that you learned.
Come on, you can mention something that was maybe hard. I mean, you did it. You made a finished film. I mean, that's more than most can say. I mean, was there anything that, like, you can say, okay, I overcame that, but you may not have known going into it?
Can you give me an example?
I don't know, just something that when you're not sitting in the director's chair, when you only see it from the other side of the camera, you may not know that a director has to do X, Y, and Z. Were there any of those things that?
Well, I was surprised that there's so much acting involved in directing. I mean, I was glad to have been an actor before, because you're constantly acting like there's not a problem, but there's always a problem. Everything's always going wrong, and you're always acting like it's fine and it's a part of the plan. So I think an acting background is good in that. That was surprising.
For those who haven't seen the film, one of my favorite set pieces is this club, this very, very morbid club. That's where you see Christina Hendricks tearing off her skin. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, especially for those who haven't seen the movie and see what they're getting themselves into.
That's a club that's sort of based on the Grand Guignol, which is was really like the birth of horror and splatter cinema. It was theater, but it was a place in the 1920s in Paris where they would put on these murder shows, these hyper-realistic sort of torture and murder shows. And there was a whole scene at that time, like the Hell Cafe and the Death Tavern, and this really macabre, dark murder entertainment scene. And so we use that a lot of that as inspiration. The facade of the club that's on the posters is like based on the front of the Hell Cafe. Mm-hmm.
Writing, you already started shooting, so you kind of had a feel for, you had your lookbook in real time, but sitting down to actually write a script, how was that for you? Did it come naturally? Did you bang your head against the wall, somewhere in between?
Yeah, it's lonely, and but the thing that you're hoping is that, I guess I had been there over the course of the year, and I knew set pieces that I wanted to use. Like, for instance, I shot the opening shot of the movie is this kind of a pan down from the ceiling to reveal this like dilapidated theater. That's the Palace Theater, I think, where I think it's called the Palace, but that was the theater where the Stooges first played, and I knew that I wanted to someday go back and finish that shot where the lead character would appear out of the hole in the stage, and which is another thing I learned from being there. That like a way that some people make money is they go around these empty buildings and they take all the copper and they strip these buildings of of the metal and sell it. So I knew I wanted my lead character to do that, and I knew that I wanted him to come out of that stage, and that's how I wanted to meet him. So then, and we did. A year later, we shot there's a year between those two shots in the movie, you know. But, so those sort of things informed the writing process, you know. It was good, I thought, to be there and to be in the environments and be able to write for specific locations, also because I knew that some of them were going to be torn down. So we wanted to hustle and we wanted to shoot in them before they were gone.
What were you looking for in the location scouting? I mean, this is a very different side of Detroit than I'm used to seeing in movies. I mean, I feel like the the post-industrial squalor is certainly has a poetry to it, but there's still all this the green, the overrun greenery and whatnot. I mean, what were some of the things that really attracted you to want to put them on film?
Well, I think it was like we wanted to find places that had history, you know, even if we weren't going to sort of reveal that history in the movie, but that like you could feel that maybe, you know. For instance, like the movie also kind of starts with a guy named Skip, who's really like a real version of what this movie's about, which is that he grew up on this street. He's now in his 50s, I think, and he's the only one left for blocks, you know. And he sort of wanders around in this street in a kind of a daze. You know, he feels like he feels like it's, you know, he's in some kind of Twilight Zone episode or something. You know, being a kid was just yesterday, and he can tell you about, you know, everything the way things used to be, you know, and who used to live there and what used to happen here. And when he's doing it, it almost becomes real. And there's like a weird daze that they get into when they talk about their neighborhoods, and we wanted to try and capture that feeling, you know. So we were looking for locations like that, for people like that, for people that could kind of, also remembered the way that they were, you know. So it wasn't just specifically like the buildings; it was also just like finding connections to those buildings.
Was there anything that you shot that you were sad to see not make it into the final film, like anything that just didn't work in the cohesive whole?
Misty and Holly. There was these two girls that were walking by when we were shooting, and they were talking about their cat, Sagwa. He had just had babies. She had just had babies. And they were incredible, and I asked them to be in the movie, and they did this amazing scene where they talked about Sagwa. And then we met our lead character. It was another way to meet him. And for the 15 cuts, we tried to have them in the film, but at the end of the day, we had to focus on the story, you know. But there were so many great people that we met that we tried to incorporate, you know, that were just didn't make the final cut, but that hurt.
You mentioned that this is that you got the band together. All your friends were working on this, people you've collaborated with. Could you maybe talk about some of the unsung heroes we haven't talked about? I really like the music, for instance, in the film.
Thanks. Yeah, Johnny Jewel. You know, I had a kind of Kaiser Sose moment with him. I felt like Chaz Palminteri, and I realized that he was behind all these bands that I loved, and kind of uncredited. And we worked together. You know, I was again like listening to a lot of his music while I was shooting, and I think he does a beautiful job. You know, it has like that '80s sensibility, but it's like still I think his own sound.
Do you listen to music when you're on set?
We did on this film. You know, we listened to. I would play the actors Johnny's music just to, you know, try and get them into the. Also, it's like hard to be listening to the crew talk, you know, when you're trying to get ready for a scene. So we played some of his music.
And what about anybody else in the cast and crew? You feel like really brought something that maybe doesn't get mentioned in these kinds of conversations?
Well, like my friend Spaff, who was one of the animators on Secret of Nim. You know, he did all this kind of like, he helped me sort of conceptualize it in the beginning, and then. You know, he used to work for Disney as well. He drew like part of the Under the Sea sequence in Little Mermaid. He drew the opening title credits of Break-In. You know, kind of everything that like had some impact on me with a kid. He was involved in. So he did lots of things on the film. Like he built our set. You know, in the club that you were mentioning. We didn't have a lot of money on the movie, so you know we had to be like creative. And he made an entire set out of cardboard in 2 hours. And you would never know that. It was so beautiful. Or everybody chipped in on this film, which was nice. We all kind of did each other's jobs, and so yeah, everybody is in there.
It's sometimes hard to talk about a film when people haven't necessarily seen it yet. I don't want to give away the pleasures that are in the movie. But you mentioned that like family movies, Amblin movies were a huge inspiration for this kind of thing. But certainly this is much darker than I remember those movies being. I'm curious what just attracts you to a darker sensibility, which I think is a through line in some of the roles that you choose as well.
Well, I guess we were just trying to, because this movie wasn't an idea first and then sort of looking for a place to shoot it, and, it wasn't like I felt like, I'm going to direct now. It came from being there. It came from wanting to make something there. It's dark days for the people in those neighborhoods, and like we could have made a documentary or we could have made a realistic film, but in a way, we wanted to try and tap into and focus on just like the emotional landscape of those characters, and so we felt like we had to, it's threatening to be there for people that are there on their own, and we wanted to kind of like honor that in a way, so it just felt like it had to be dark. It had to be sort of like there had to be an impending threat in order to sort of, do justice to it.
I think at this point we are going to turn it over. I don't even get to pick the people. I think some people have already been.
Hey, I actually worked on the movie with you. I was an intern.
Hi.
Do you remember me? No?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So one of my tasks was always to pack the boxes of film at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool. I mean, I still shoot 35, like, still photography, and I just wanted to know, like, how you got funding, first of all, for 35, because it's, like, really expensive, and then why you chose to do 35.
Thanks for your work again. Nice to see you. Sorry we have to meet like this. So the 35 was, it's something I grew up watching films, so like my dream was to make a film on film. It seemed like, it's hard to do now, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it, and also I was shooting on my Red and getting beautiful stuff, so I just felt like maybe I'm just being romantic about film. But then, my DP, Benoit, he's like film to the grave, and he was such an advocate for it that I felt like I had an ally there, and once I had that partner, we were able to kind of fight for it, And
there is some digital stuff in there, right?
Yeah, it's a mix of the Red and
I was rewatching the film last night. I was looking for it, knowing that, and it was seamless to me.
You can't really tell. I mean, you can tell, and I think. Well, anyway, I don't want to bore you. There's like difference between film and digital, but I'm glad we did it, on film. I felt like also film's kind of a dying thing, and we were trying to. I don't think it is dying, but it feels like it's on life support, and it felt like the right thing to shoot this movie on, given the subject matter. But I loved it, and I thought it had like. I'm really glad that we fought for it, But and in terms of like getting money for it, it all kind of worked out to be the same, Like they say it's more expensive, but I didn't really find that, you have to be more careful about how you use it. You can't shoot it. You can't be, you have to be really specific about what you shoot. But I think if you are, you can kind of work it. It works out to be the same.
Hey Ryan, since the film came out, a lot of people have been noticing that a lot of the shots are inspired by like David Lynch, Dario Argento, and Terrence Malick. Are there any filmmakers in particular you're trying to emulate in a sense? And what do you think is really important as a means of finding your voice as a filmmaker to stand out on your own while also emulating?
We weren't trying to reference any other filmmakers in the movie, I was drinking a lot of David Lynch coffee at the time. That might have had an impact, I feel like people talk in references nowadays. It's just the way that you talk about things. Even when you want to get a movie made, you can't get it made unless you say it's like this meets that, or a band comes out and they go, it's like this, it's that band and this band, and you have to kind of make a few films before people let that go and they stop referencing you to other people. You know, it's certainly not something that we talked about. You know, and I think that would be something that's very hard to do in reality. It's more like something that if you haven't made a movie, you think that's the way it works, but when you make one, you know, the environment that you're shooting in, the people that you're working with, like those are the things that really dictate what the style becomes, you know? Like my DP, Benoit, you know, he was the biggest influence on the aesthetic of the movie, you know? But I think in terms of finding your own voice, you know, you have to make films to find that, you know? And, you know, film is a language that you learn from other filmmakers. That's how you learn to speak it, you know? And you know, I always grew up listening to like Spielberg talk about Kurosawa and how he was trying to make Kurosawa movies in the beginning, and you know, they all do that. And I think that's kind of what's great about it, you know, that it's like a language.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Did you have any, as a director, any biases or sensibilities towards your actors, since you have such a past as an actor?
What do you mean by biases?
Like, if you had certain ways of working with them or understandings of them that were different than, you know, other directors in the ways you personally worked with them or understood their technique.
Right. I think I know what you mean. Well, a lot of them I had worked with before, so I kind of knew how they worked. You know, I had such a good experience with them. I wanted to work with them again, and I felt like I knew what they were capable of. I also felt like I was able to see a side of them off camera, you know, that I hadn't seen in their work, you know. So I thought I'd like to find a way to highlight that or give them a chance to show that side of themselves. And then there were other actors that I hadn't worked with that I didn't know what the hell to do. Like, for instance, Matt Smith, you know. One day I heard his voice on the TV. It was Doctor Who. And he was doing an episode where he had a microphone and he was, you know, just like telling all these spaceships the way it was going to be. And he was just, you know, like doing it like a boss, you know, just, you know, literally ruling the universe from a microphone. And I thought, I know as an actor that's a hard scene because I'm pretty sure those spaceships weren't there, you know. But my God, you know, you would never know it from his performance. And I thought, this guy is incredible. That's so hard. He's making it look so easy. I got to work with him. And then he got on set, you know, and he, you know, it was like as a first-time director, having never fired a gun, and then someone hands you a machine gun. You know, he just is a cruise missile, and he's like such a powerful talent that I didn't really know, you know, how to direct him. So I decided, like, not really to try, you know, just to let him kind of do his thing. And I think he created a really amazing, like, character. I've never seen this character in a movie, so it really worked out in that case.
I want to sneak one in here real quick, kind of bridging those two last questions. Were there any specific tips that you learned from filmmakers that you worked with that you were able to apply on set? Things that, like, you know, I understand why such and such asked me or collaborated with me in this way, and you were able to use yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that, like, the filmmakers that I've had a great experience with kind of, they treated it like a collaboration, you know, not like a dictatorship, you know. And I felt like that makes you want to, you know, give more of yourself to their project, you know, because they're treating you like an equal, you know. And so I feel like that was like a good, you know, that was a good thing to sort of, that was a good, you know, way to handle it, you know, that you know, it's kind of like best idea wins, you know, and if everybody feels like their ideas are being kind of like heard and respected, then everyone's personally invested in your movie, and you get, like, you know, you get the best of everyone.
Hi, so I had a question about the title sequence design. So even just in that clip, it was really beautifully done, and I know it's really important in setting the tone of the movie, but I was curious as to whose idea that was and how you guys came about deciding on how to do that.
Which part, like the fonts, or just
Well, like, even just the fonts as well as just how it was like set up and like really eerily and everything
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
That was just something that, we made an initial trailer. So there's, I don't know how to like be. We made an initial trailer that was sort of meant to sort of give a broad, a sense of the story, But then it didn't necessarily capture the tone, It gave you a sense of what the movie was about, but it didn't we felt like lay out how it felt. So we did this second one because we wanted to sort of show the other side of the movie, And that was just something that I cut with my editor, as opposed to the other piece, which was like more from a trailer house company, But I think they work well together, And in terms of font, like it's hard because it sort of really defines your movie, and you can really kind of stress out over what every little bit means, So at a certain point, you just have to kind of let go. But that's on fonts.com, and it's called Dead Man's Curve. You're all welcome to use it if you like it.
Hi.
Hi.
First off, congrats. Awesome accomplishment.
Thanks.
I just wanted to ask if you had any advice for anyone who had kind of the same goals or aspirations to direct or filmmake or anything. Any lessons learned that anyone here would want to take note of, I guess?
Yeah, just do it. And don't listen to the haters, You got to just keep going and making your movies. And now's a great time to do it because you can, and I'm not plugging Apple, but you can use your iPhone and you can make a film, I just saw a film called Tangerine that was made on an iPhone. It's
incredible,
It's beautiful. The software is easy to cut, there's no real reason not to now, and there's so many ways to show your film online that you can really, let's say you got friends that want to be actors, as opposed to them auditioning or trying to get agents and all that stuff, you just make movies with them and you know what's great about your friends and you just give them a chance to show that, and then if you're a filmmaker, you shoot that, and you got a friend who wants to be an editor, let them cut it, and it's like what John Cassavetes did, but he did it in a lot, it was so much harder when he did it because he had to shoot on film and cut on a moviola and use lights, and now it's so much easier, and there's also just maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not, but there's a casting website called Cast It, which we used for our movie. Well, just for certain characters, but you don't have to have an agent to audition on this site, and I thought that's how I found my lead character, Iain, on this site. He does have an agent, but he also had put this up on Cast It, and it's just a great website because if you're a filmmaker or you want to make something, you can see your movie 100 different ways, and it's from just regular people filming themselves in their home or whatever. Maybe they make a short film out of it, but you get to see your project in 100 different incarnations, and it helps you to understand, what you're making because these people have given you all these options of ways to see it. But it's also a great way to bypass the system and having to get an agent and get auditions and all of that. So I would recommend that website too, if you want to make a film.
Well, that's unfortunately all the time we have left, but thank you all so much for coming out.
Thank you all very
Lost
much.
River is playing in theaters. It's on iTunes, VOD, etc. Once again, RYan Gosling.
The best way to just make it more accessible to everyone, because it feels like there's Lost Rivers everywhere, not just in Detroit, and that's sort of what's happening to them is something that is specific to there, but also something that I wanted sort of everybody to be able to relate to. So we sort of gave it this fairy tale tone, and that's how the movie sort of began.
You talked last night that you basically just started roaming with the red camera and basically started making a movie before you even knew you were going to be making a movie. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the creative itches that directing scratched for you that you don't ordinarily get working in film as an actor.
Well, yeah, that's sort of how it started. It started with there were these Brewster projects, which are the projects where they call them the Motown projects, where the Supremes grew up, and they just have a great music history, and they're about to be torn down. And I thought, I thought I wanted to film them, so I got a red camera. I started shooting them, and then there was there's more like I heard about the Palace Theater, which is where the Stooges first played, and that was going to be torn down. And so I started filming, and then after a year, I realized, I guess I'm shooting footage for a movie, and you know, I guess I'm making a movie. This is lonely. I should get some people here. And so I sort of wrote the script, and then I got the actors, and then eventually we were shooting, you know, not on the red anymore, on film, and it was like an actual film. But I guess some of the itches that it scratched were, I guess it was like an opportunity to try some things out, you know, that you don't always get to try on.
It's a romantic comedy. Very happy to bring on out here writer-director RYan Gosling. You doing?
Thank you very much.
How many of you were at the screening last night, just curiously? A few people. Cool.
No one. All right. Great.
You know, this seeing this like alternate, very not safe for work trailer. It's darker. I like that. It doesn't really give too much away, and you know, I like for those who haven't yet seen the movie, if you can talk about what this dark fairy tale is all about.
Well, it's sort of, so I had an opportunity to work in Detroit, and I'm from Canada, so let's just get that out of the way right now. And I guess growing up in Canada, you know, Detroit was far enough away that I never got there, but it was close enough that I had like I guess like a crush on it or something. It just seemed like everything cool came from Detroit, you know? Like Eminem and the Model T and, you know, Motor City, just the whole like iconic idea of the American dream. And when I got there, which was a few years ago, it's very different now. They were declaring bankruptcy. It's like 40 miles of abandoned buildings, a lot of, you know, houses burning, being torn down, turning off the power to the street lights. And within these empty neighborhoods, occasionally there's a family trying to hold on to their home. And it seemed that, you know, like the dream had turned into a nightmare for these people. So I thought I'd like to try and make a film about that. And then I thought this sort of fairy tale approach might be on every film. Like, for instance, you know, there's something very like surreal about what's happening there, but at the same time, it's also very real. And I wanted to try and make a film that like incorporated both of those elements. So part of what we tried to do was give it a heightened reality and a fairy tale tone, but also incorporate people from the neighborhoods to give it that sort of to bring the reality into the fantasy. And that was sort of the most fun. It was like sort of working with the non-actors and the actors and trying to balance those tones.
How much? I mean, some of my favorite sequences are the ones that have locals just kind of roaming in there, and you really feel it. It has a different kind of energy
Right.
when there's non-professionals mixing with actors. How much of it was made in the moment? How much did you rely on just